Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast is about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is Rita Bliven.
Mhm.
Bliven?
Bliven.
See, I always say to myself, I'm going to practice the name before I do the show, and I never do. So, okay. So
It's
this will be
okay.
part of my blooper reel. So Rita, let me tell you about a little bit about Rita. She has written Canyons and Fireworks, which we'll talk about later on the show, which details her lifelong journey of healing from an extreme avoidant attachment style through encounters with God, faith, family, and Christian community. Reading books and years of counseling, she has learned to truly open up and enjoy loving relationships. Rita, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. How are you? Sorry, I fumbled through your bio there.
No, you're fine. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm super excited.
Well, it's my pleasure. So, Rita, tell me a little bit about your journey. I just read a little bit about it, but what was that aha moment that you had to go through? I guess self-reflection, reading, learning about attachment styles. What was that journey like?
It's been a lifelong journey. So, credit to my mom. She got me in professional Christian counseling when I was 13 or 14 years old. And so I've known for a very long time that I had an attachment issue. And in my book, I write about why I had an attachment issue, but I don't want to waste time on that today.
Okay.
Um, but it was pretty severe. And so I struggled to feel or receive love, trust others, and I didn't really have a sense of self or identity. And I feared intimacy. And believe it or not, it's actually pretty common. Now, a lot of people have, avoidant attachment and might be able to relate to some of what I said. But in my case, it was very extreme. I had trouble even trusting my loving family members that, really didn't give me any reason not to trust them. And so that's why I embarked on this journey. And it's been, most of my life, I've been learning about attachment theory and the different attachment styles, the traumas that cause attachment problems, and then of course attachment healing. So it's been a lifelong journey.
No, it's funny because I went through the same thing early on because I grew up with my grandparents.
Ah,
So
okay.
I wanted to know. I mean, it took me years, I think to my mid 30s or something like that, to finally talk to
Mhm.
my mother about it. I went to see counseling also because at the same thing, I sabotaged a lot of relationships early on because if
Yep.
someone loved me, I was like, I'm out of there. And I'm thinking, oh,
Hmm.
that's cool that I could do that, but it just ruined so many good relationships that I had,
Hmm.
especially when I was younger, in my late 20s, 30s, even up to my maybe early 40s. Again, I
Hmm.
had to, figure out what happened after I talked to my mother. Then I just started, everything started coming together. Then I'm like, oh,
Uh-huh.
okay, now I see, so it definitely changed after that. Again, it took me maybe, I guess, 30s, 40s to finally realize, hey, you know what? I can do this. I can be with someone. So for those that might not know,
Hmm.
what is attachment issues? If you could explain a little bit more, obviously,
Sure.
like we both said it, but maybe we could make it in simpler terms.
Absolutely. So the basic theory of attachment theory is that a child needs to develop a lasting bond with at least one primary caregiver.
Mm.
And if that doesn't happen, then the child does not have the blueprints that they need for future relationships. And that includes relationships with themselves, with others, as well as relationships with, external things like food and money. And it just affects your
Mm.
relationships. So you need that strong, fundamental, foundational relationship to build other relationships upon. And so a child that suffers, some sort of, abuse, neglect, or extreme separation is most likely to have a disrupted bond and then have an attachment issue. I will say that today there's new research that says that 2/3 of adults living in the West now have some sort of attachment issue. So in
Wow.
my case, I had an extreme separation, well, extreme separations that caused me to develop avoidant attachment. And I would probably fall under the avoidant attachment disorder category,
Uh,
at the height of my problems. But today, the research that suggests there's 2/3 of adults living with some sort of attachment issue might not have had abuse, neglect, or extreme separation, but they've had something hinder their foundation of love. So maybe it's, the unexpected loss that seems kind of traumatic of a parent that you bonded with, even in adulthood could cause you to have an attachment issue, or maybe it was a really messy divorce or
mm.
postpartum depression. There are all sorts of things that can cause an attachment issue that's not a full blown disorder like I had.
Wow. Okay. So that's an amazing stat. 2/3 of adults have attachment issues. So so if you have something like that, but see, for me, it was more relationships, but I love still hanging out with people, whether they were men or
Mhm,
women. Does that affect that also, that those type of relationships, friends, and like you say earlier, that you also had issues with family members.
mhm.
So I'm assuming also that could be uh, with friends and really close, yeah, I guess friends, close friends that you grew up with. So that could also affect that relationship too.
Yep. So in my case, I had issues with my relationship with myself
Okay.
and my relationship with family and intimate relationships. I actually had a lot of friends and could easily connect with friends.
Mm,
Mine affected my own sense of self and identity, family, and then romantic relationships. So it presents itself in different ways. Again, I was a more severe case, but you could have an attachment issue where you're great with your family, you're great with friends, you have a strong sense of self, but you're just apprehensive in romantic relationships.
right.
Or a different combination. It's all about your all of your relationships. And
Mm,
so, it's for listeners, they might say, well, I'm very, secure in my family and secure in myself, and I have a wonderful partner, but I have trouble making friends. That might
mm.
be an attachment issue. Probably not a full-blown disorder, but probably, it might be an attachment issue.
Wow. And it's funny because as you were talking about, having attachments with family or friends or whatever, or definitely with relationships, and that's what I went through, especially with relationships, because like I said, I was close to, a lot of good friends of mine, men and women. But again, like I said earlier, but anytime it came to a relationship with a woman, I just felt like, wait a minute, I don't know what love is. I don't know what this is. You know, is that part of it? Like you said earlier, because you don't have that special bonding with a parent. Because I grew up with my grandparents. So when my grandma passed away, I was maybe 14, 15, 16, I think, around there.
Oh.
Right. But my grandfather wasn't, in the Latin community, he's supposed to be macho and all that stuff. He didn't show me any love. I knew he
Mm.
loved me, but like a son, but it was that words never came out of his mouth like that. And how important are words? Is it words, affection? Is it a combination of both? Is it just one or the other? How important is those things to a child early on?
I think it's a combination of everything. So,
Okay.
nowadays it's pretty mainstream, the five love languages.
Yeah.
And there's words of affirmation, physical touch, gifts, quality time, and acts of service. And I think that as we mature, we tend to tilt towards a couple that we need more than the others. But really, a child needs all of them. So you could grow up to be an adult that's not really into physical touch. Well, guess what? As a baby, you need physical touch.
Right.
You need somebody to change your diaper. You could, again, grow up and be somebody who's not really too concerned with acts of service. Well, a child needs their primary caregiver to give them acts of service. So I think during our development, we need all of them. We need all of those acts of, all of those love languages. And I think in your case, it doesn't have to be a bond with a parent, a biological parent. It just has to be with a primary caregiver that's
Okay.
consistent. And so I think in your case, it was probably, and I'm sure a little bit impacted by the fact that you lived with your grandparents. But in your case, it might be more so related to the death of your grandmother at a very transitional time in your life. Did you say 13 or 14?
Yeah, I think it was like 14, 15, 16.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember. I think I might have been 15, if I remember correctly,
Yeah. So that is the developmental stage of intimacy.
Right.
That is adolescent years, like 13, 14, 15. And so you lost your primary loving caregiver at that time, who also happened to be the woman in your life. And
Yeah.
so that makes sense that you got into romantic relationships and, to your quote, didn't know what love was. In
Yeah.
reality, you knew what love was, but your development was there was a hiccup in your development of intimacy right at that stage.
Oh,
And so
100%. Yeah.
yeah, I would say you probably had more of it sounds like avoidant attachment issue versus an avoidant attachment disorder. And so just to clarify, there's healthy attachment and there's unhealthy attachment. And
Okay.
even with unhealthy attachment, you can tilt avoidant or anxious. Okay.
Okay.
But it's in the realm of healthy. Then we move over to the unhealthy attachment, and there's extreme anxious attachment or disorder, and there's extreme avoidant attachment or disorder.
Mm.
And that's where there's things are a little bit more dramatic. So avoidant tends to shut down or push people away when people get too close.
Mm.
And anxious tends to say, "Oh my goodness, you're leaving me. I'm gonna make you not leave me. I'm
Uh,
gonna chase after you." So
right.
avoidant runs away and anxious runs toward.
Wha- I, boy, it's just by you saying that, especially, being avoidant. Like I said, I could definitely come back to some of my stories and
Mhm.
love life, especially in my 20s and 30s, which was almost non-existent because I was, just afraid to love someone. Can this be generational? Can this be passed down? Because if one doesn't do it, then you say, well, that's how I was raised. I'll raise my son, daughter this way also. I think maybe this is right, or the right way. How prevalent is that in society now? Can that be passed from generation to generation, or uh somebody
It
could
absolutely
okay, yeah,
it
go ahead, please.
absolutely is. It absolutely is. And it's a little bit cultural. So
Ah, okay.
that's one of the reasons why in the West the statistic is so high now, because we have widespread divorce, we have the breakdown of the nuclear family, we have really a mental health epidemic
Yeah.
in the States. And so those things erode healthy attachment in families. So there's a little bit of, I always say, there's, ever since the Roseanne Barr show, do you remember the Roseanne
Yeah,
Barr show?
sure, sure, sure.
We've sort of normalized a level of family dysfunction in the West. So
Yes.
I call it the socially acceptable family dysfunction. Now, of course, if you're abused or neglected, that's not socially acceptable. But some of the, boundary issues, some of the codependency, some of the emotional outbursts are now socially acceptable. And so if you're a child developing and there is just this like innate dysfunction in your family, then you're not going to feel as safe and secure and as loved as, a family that strives to operate in a more healthy way on purpose. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And it's funny because when my parents got divorced, like I said, I was with my grandparents. So this is like in
Mhm.
the God, again, I was 13, 14, 15. My sisters went with my mother, my
Mhm.
brother at the time went with my father. So it was
Mm.
just like everybody was all over the place. So I grew up, like I said, by myself. And my brother that was a year younger than me, he passed away in the 90s. He got sick.
Mm.
Um, but with my sisters, I still keep two out of the three sisters I keep in contact with. So we text each other every once in a while. We call each other. So we always try to keep in contact and tell each other, "Hey, we love you. I love you. Whatever."
Mm.
And talking about that, I'm telling you, Rita. We're talking with Rita Bliven. Today's topic is having attachment issues. it took me so long to say the words "I love you," me personally. I remember I went to I think a 3 or 4 day, like a personal development thing, and everything just flushed out. And
Mm.
then because those words to me, when someone said them to me or I said it to someone else, it was just words, didn't have any meaning. So when I
It's
finally was able to say it, it opened up something. What it was, I still trying to figure it out, but it did open up something in me, in my heart, and in my gut. Did I
I
make sense
love
at all?
that.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. Yeah. So it's funny because, we develop healthier attachment as we attach.
Right.
So, it's kind of like, well, you need a healthier level of attachment in order to attach. It's like working out. You don't get abs from laying on the couch. You get abs from going to the gym,
Right. From working out.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's the same. So I would say that you put attachment out there by saying I love you.
Right.
And then you were able to, and then that solidified your attachment and you were able to feel the love that was already there that maybe you were a little bit disconnected from.
Oh, big time. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And like I said, this was in my mid to late 40s. So,
Wow.
it's such a journey, how important it is, to show love to your kids or,
Mhm.
and I don't have any kids but like any nephews and nieces or, friends, their kids, I just hug them, play with them, whatever I could do to show love. Um, how important is a community then? Whether let's say if it's not even family, because family tend to move away or whatever, but how important is community, like close friends, a close knit, I guess what they call it, an extended family? How important is that now as someone is getting older?
It's so important. And there are statistics that I think it's your mortality increases 43% when you're isolated. Don't quote me, that might be a tad bit off, but it's
Okay.
something near there. And so, ideally, we all have two loving parents that take care of us and are healthy and emotionally healthy and supportive and loving. And then we have an extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins that also are supportive and loving. And then we have a community.
Right.
Our parents have a community of people, friends, family that are sort of second aunts and uncles, second grandparents. And then we venture out into the world and create our own friends, our own attachments. And then we enter into a healthy, romantic, lifelong commitment. That's the ideal. That's the perfect ideal. And then
Right.
from that place of all of these important people, this village, they always say it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah, yeah,
Then
yeah.
we're able to have healthy relations, not necessarily connections, with the people that we interact with at our job, the people that we interact with on the road. We're less likely to have road rage. The people that we interact with when we go to the grocery store, strangers, and then also just our community at large. Now, we all know that most people don't have the perfect scenario.
Yeah.
And so that's where I don't want to say substitutes come in, but you know, in your later years, your parents may have been extremely healthy, but they may have just passed on and aren't
Right.
able to give you that love and support here on earth anymore. And so that's why it's so important then to lean into those extended relationships, the extended family and the friend family. And so it's not just to further your development, it's that there are different life stages. And
Yeah.
so, most likely some of the people that were very supportive in your earlier years are going to pass on before the end of your life. And so that's why you need to have those strong relationships as much as you possibly can and then branch out. And some of those people that you branch out to will, move away or, get divorced from their spouse and want nothing to do with you because you remind them of your spouse or,
Yeah,
whatever the
yeah,
case may be, but
yeah,
you need to branch out because relationships are constantly evolving.
yeah,
And so a relationship that was very supportive and nurturing and loving could end maybe because of a death or, relocation, or maybe just because the friendship fizzles out, or whatever the case may be. And so you need to constantly be evolving starter relationships to grow into more supportive roles.
Yeah. Wow. You know, I wanted to say, what are signs that we could look for are having issues, and what are steps, if you can, and we'll talk about your book in a minute, to get out of that, or to be, I guess the biggest thing is always be trying to be self-aware.
Mhm.
Um, are there things that we should look out for that,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
so you
absolutely.
knew where I
And
was going.
yeah. And in dating, we should look for it in the person that we're dating as well.
Okay.
So we should be self-aware of our
Mm.
own attachment styles, and we should have some sort of understanding of the attachment of the person that we're dating. Now, of course, if it's just super casual, you might not need to know that
Okay.
person's attachment style. But if you're wanting to move the relationship more serious into a more serious relationship, it would probably be helpful to know that person's attachment style. And again, even in the healthy category, someone usually tilts either avoidant or anxious, even
Mm.
within the healthy range. So it's just super helpful to know what your most close relationships with that person's attachment style is. So what avoidant attachment looks like is hyper independence, fear of intimacy. So there's just a natural push to push people away when things get super close. I like to say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So if I, especially in this day and age, in the modern day, and
Uh-huh.
that's what they call it now, more and more women are saying, "Oh, I'm strong and independent." Are they just giving out the signals that, hey, you know what? I'm not looking for any type of relationships. I'm good by myself. Is that a buzzwords that we should look out for?
I think so, because again, there are higher statistics now of attachment issues, and part of that is cultural. Our culture
Mm,
does promote hyper independence now.
okay.
And that's not necessarily the healthiest thing for an individual, male or female. We are created to need community. We need love. We do. And so hyper independence might sound good, in alignment with the American dream and, this rugged independence where you don't need anybody and you can make your own way in the world.
Yeah.
But it's not exactly the healthiest mindset. Now, are there outliers? Sure. There are super hyper independent people who also have good, healthy, strong relationships. But that's not the norm. That's the exception. If somebody is wearing their hyper independence as a badge of honor, that may be maybe not a red flag, but a pink flag. Let's just,
You're
let's just
being
put it that way.
kind.
Yeah, it might not be like a total red flag, but it's something to be cognizant of.
Right.
So again, the avoidant personality, or I'm sorry, avoidant attachment style probably is going to be successful in their career because
Mm,
they don't mind putting relationships aside to work those late hours.
right.
They usually at some point mention their hyper independence. They usually do not have this long list of damaging relationships, where, oh, I was with that person for 5 years. I should have broken up with them after 6 months.
Yeah.
They're not those people. They're those people that, break up with people cruelly and cut people off without any problem. I like to say that there's a bit of a default of no. So I'm sure you've all heard, of the people pleaser that just, says yes
Yeah.
before they even had a chance to think. The avoidant is the opposite. Their default is no. No, you can't come over. No, I can't come over. No, we're not taking this relationship to a deeper level. No, 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 no. That's their default in
Yeah.
relationships. And then, on a deeper level, they are afraid of intimacy. So, you could be on a date with somebody that loves to go out dancing, loves to go to, a wine tasting, loves to be around a whole bunch of people, and they just seem like the ideal date. But then as soon as it's one on one, and you start asking, more personal questions like, what are your hopes and dreams? What was your childhood like? Then all of a sudden it's a different experience, and that person may tilt avoidant because it's
Mm,
the intimacy. And it's not always physical intimacy, it's the emotional intimacy that they, shy away from. I will say, someone with an avoidant attachment style does still struggle with loneliness. So
Yeah.
it's funny because they're kind of the creator of their own loneliness, but it doesn't change the fact that they still have those needs to connect. It's just they have trouble getting there.
Yeah.
So those are red flags or cautions to look for in yourself and to look for in someone that you want to have a
Yes.
serious relationship with. And it doesn't have to always be a romantic relationship. It could be a business partnership. It
Yeah.
could be, a mentor, whatever. If you want to have a serious relationship, you want to know if someone is sounding like they're more in that category.
Wow.
On the flip, on the flip side, anxious attachment, you know, they're the people that are highly aware that they need love and support and are constantly trying to get it. They run towards relationships, sometimes a little too fast. We all know those people that, are planning their wedding after, 10 days of knowing someone.
Yeah.
That and again, we've all done that or maybe, exhibited some of those traits, but it's a reoccurring theme with them. They dive into relationships very quickly. They're not one to stay in casual relationship mode. They dive in. They're constantly trying to get it to a more intimate
Yeah.
level. Sometimes recklessly and sometimes despite red flags. And maybe when they shouldn't, when the person isn't a good match, but they just want to feel that love and acceptance so much that they ignore red flags or ignore, some of the social norms of relationships and they just push past um, you know, boundaries. And, I have personally observed that people suffering from anxious attachment in an extreme sense do engage in more risky behavior. And again, because they're just so desperate to get those needs met. They're the person that you could, we just had Valentine's Day. So I'm going to use Valentine's Day as an
Yeah.
example. You could shower them with love, you know, buy them a dozen roses, take them on a wonderful dinner date, buy them a thoughtful gift, and write them a thoughtful note, and they'll love it. But then it's not enough. It's, well, why isn't
Mm,
every day like this? If you can do this on Valentine's Day, why can't you do this every day?
right.
And there's some truth, I'm sure there's some healthy people that have said things like that. But with the person that's dealing with anxious attachment, it's never enough. It's they need more and more and more and more. So you see the opposites between
Yeah.
avoidant and the anxious and how both have, characteristics or behaviors that are really toxic to a relationship. And I think the second part of your question was how to come out of it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah. So, it's a little different depending on your style. So, with anxious attachment, it has a lot to do with self-soothing and behavior modification.
Hmm.
So, someone who is healthy but just tilts towards anxious attachment might get a little annoyed if they text their loved one and the loved one doesn't text them right back. Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Someone someone with an extreme anxious attachment style will text a loved one, they won't text them right back, and they go into catastrophe mode. Oh, they're cheating on me. Oh, they don't love me anymore. And may even leave work to drive in their car to go check to see if the person is cheating on them. Do you kind of
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
the
Oh,
difference?
definitely. Yes.
So part of the treatment is behavior modification and self-soothing to say to self-talk and say they might just be busy. I don't need to react. I can take a deep breath. This doesn't mean they don't love me anymore. This doesn't mean that they're abandoning me. I need to just give it a moment and be reasonable. And then the behavior modification is even though they may have an urge to go investigate or to, take further action to wait and that's difficult but worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it. And it's similar but obviously a little different with somebody who's dealing with avoidant attachment. If they have the urge to shut down or to withdraw, they need to self soothe also, but then challenge themselves to say, I feel like shutting down right now, but there's no real reason to shut down. I've analyzed the situation. This person hasn't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
This person isn't attacking me. They're actually loving me. And then push past what's naturally comfortable. So the avoidant needs to push past,
Right.
and anxious needs to maybe suppress. Suppress
Okay.
is a bad word because that has a negative connotation, but maybe slow down and not react.
Yeah.
So both take a level of self-awareness and both take a level of self-soothing, but one requires more action and one requires less action.
Makes sense. Yeah, no, definitely makes sense. Well, first of all, Rita, I want to thank you so much for being on People on Dating. This was,
Oh, thank
and
you.
to me, an important topic to talk about. Before I let you go, talk more about your book. Tell us where we could find it. What was the inspiration to write the book?
Sure. So the inspiration is just, like I said, I've had a lifelong avoidant attachment healing journey, and I'm on the other side of it now. I'm, happily married, love being a stepmom, all the wonderful relational benchmarkers. And I, just realized that I needed to share the story, that there were
Yeah.
others suffering, and I needed to share it. And so that's why I wrote the book. It's actually not published yet. It's in editing, and I hope to have it available later this year.
Okay.
The name the name is Canyons and Fireworks. I do have a website, canyonsandfireworks.com, and you can stay up to date by visiting the website. I have links to my blog and my social media pages on the website. So that's the easiest way to follow me and to stay up to date on release dates and things of that nature.
Nice. Sounds good. Anything else you want to talk about or promote?
I would just say thank you so much for having me on your show. I think that this is, we talk about marriage, we talk about parenting. There isn't enough talk about dating. And,
100%. Yeah.
I didn't get married till I was 37. In part, well, mainly because I had an avoidant attachment issue, but I still dated. And I think that I didn't have productive dating. It
Mm,
was more just the thrill or the distraction of dating without really learning how to be vulnerable and really learning how to work through issues.
yeah.
And so I think that dating is a beautiful place to learn how to be vulnerable and learn how to work through issues, not just for the purpose of having a quality relationship, but also for the purpose of self growth. And I just don't think there's enough talk about that. I mean, people just roll their eyes and say, "I'm so glad I'm not in the dating scene anymore," or
Yeah.
they get really excited and say, "I have so much fun dating," as opposed to really seeing dating as an opportunity for growth. And so I think it's great that you are doing this podcast.
No, I appreciate that. I want to, the podcast to be different. Too many podcasts out there are sensational and,
Mhm.
just throwing people out of the studio and just, it's stuff like this is important. This is the first topic I ever talked
Mhm.
about on the show. So once, we got in contact with each other, I thought this was important to talk about. So I appreciate that. Tell us one more time, where can people find you?
Canyonsandfireworks.com. That's my website. And I do have a blog, canyons, the letter N, fireworks.blogspot.com. And of course I have, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that. And there are links to that all on my website.
All right, sounds good. I'll definitely put that on the show notes. Well, anyway, Rita, again, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.